All right. So our Torah portion is Beshalach. Beshalach. In the Eitz Chaim Chumash, it begins on page 399. 399. It is Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. That's where we begin. And I was saying just a moment ago, Beshalach, the word Beshalach was as he sent out, as he pushed out, as Pharaoh pushed out the Israelites from Egypt. What was the itinerary? How are we going to go, and so on and so forth. So this is the follow-up. We got out of Egypt at the very end of last week's parsha, and now we're out there, and it becomes a little bit crazy. Now what do we do? So the beginning of the Torah portion gives us this wandering around that we do with God's guidance. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Pharaoh has second thoughts and decides to start running after the Israelites and bring them back after he threw them out the first time. Now he wants to go back on his word and get them. And by the time he catches up with them, they are planted at God's direction at the banks of the Red Sea. And now they're stuck between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army of chariots and his military might that is rushing toward them. And God protects them for one evening. There's a night where Pharaoh's army camps out and is preparing for the final capture the next day. And God puts a barrier between the Egyptians and the Israelites, so that night is a night of peaceful anxiety. And then the next day, we have the famous splitting of the Red Sea, and the Egyptians get caught.
I'm sorry, Rabbi, can you mute everybody, because there's a couple of non-muted people, and there's this feedback that's making a really
Susan,
distressing.
can you mute your phone, star
And
6?
there's someone who's on the phone. Numbers end in 6-4. That there's a.
Yeah. So who's somebody?
It's me. What do I have to do to mute it?
Star 6.
Star 6. Done.
Thank you.
This was like the night before the splitting of the Red Sea. Quiet, and everything is calm, and everything is good. All right. Anyway, so we have the splitting of the Red Sea, and then we come into the outburst of song that happens. This is already by now, we're at chapter 15, and this is what gives the name to our Shabbat, Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song, of singing, the famous song at the Red Sea. And that goes, it has its own special place. And that finishes. And then we go and we start moving. And we start going along into the wilderness. And we have a number of stories that happen one after another. One story is the story of Marah, bitterness. And we come to another place of water, and the waters are bitter, whatever that means. They can't be drunk. Everybody's complaining. And we have a special Tu B'Shvat appropriate story. As I said, this Torah reading is always read around Tu B'Shvat. And God says, you want to fix the water so that everybody can drink the water? Throw a tree into the water. And the tree is the special solution that sweetens up the waters. And that episode has a few other enigmatic things that are mentioned there. But that's the end of that story. It concludes with God saying, Ani Hashem Rofecha, I, God, am your healer. And then we go to another place, Elim. And Elim is a story that's exactly one verse long. We get to this other oasis called Elim, and that has 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, also very appropriate for Tu B'Shvat. and we enjoy ourselves at Elim for one verse. And then we finally get out into a place where it seems to have less water and less oases, and we get another complaint, right? We complained at Marah, and now we complain again that we have, we're unhappy. And this is the introduction to, most famously, God provides for the children of Israel with some, what do you call those birds? Pheasant, slav, and also man. So manna. And we have a whole long discussion about the manna and our getting used to the manna and dealing with the manna. And we don't do such a great job at the beginning, and then we settle down a little bit. And this manna story is not only important because of manna, it's also important because we are introduced for the first time to Shabbat. Shabbat plays a major role in the way the manna works. And we are commanded to observe Shabbat in this Torah reading before we get to the next Torah reading next week for the 10 Commandments, where we have the famous commandment to observe Shabbat. We have it here. So Shabbat is really intertwined with the miraculous story of the manna. Then we get the famous story of more complaining about water. And this time Moses has to hit the rock to get water to come out. He does the hitting the rock the right way because God tells him to hit the rock. And that's, all good. And then finally, the last piece of the story is the attack of Amalek. And we repel them. Joshua leads the forces to fight against Amalek, and God swears, and this is the ending of our Torah portion, God swears that there will be an eternal conflict between God and Amalek, and God swears not to give up until finally Amalek is wiped out. And that's the end of the Torah portion. So the Torah portion is famous for the singing, but actually there's a lot in this Torah portion about tzaras that are not so wonderfully resolved. A lot of push and pull that goes on with the Israelites struggling in the very first month of their freedom to get used to it. And more than once, they keep on saying, why don't we just go back to Egypt? Why did we leave Egypt? It's so much better in Egypt. This is a chorus that they also sing throughout the Torah reading. Anyway, that's the whole story there. Okay, now we, as usual, who wants to focus on a particular piece? Has chosen a particular piece to focus on. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay. So if I'm going to have to decide what to do, then I would suggest, I would like to look at the man story, the story of the man. So as I said, so that begins on chapter 16. 414 is the page in the Eitz Chaim, Exodus chapter 16. So I'd like to invite somebody, please, to read for us. All right, Alan, thank you.
Starting on verse 4?
Starting in verse 1.
Verse 1. Uh-oh. Setting out from Elim, the whole Israelite community came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after their departure from the land of Egypt.
So this is 1 month after the Exodus. right? The 15th day of the second month. They left Egypt on the 15th day of the first month. So this is 1 month later.
Pesach Sheni.
Yeah, not yet. Hasn't been established yet.
Okay, well, we didn't get there yet.
Right.
In the wilderness, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, when we ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to starve this whole congregation to death."
All right. So here we go. You know, this is clearly rational thought based on the facts, based on the evidence. Here it is. Okay, go ahead.
And the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each day that day's portion, that I may thus test them to see whether they will follow my instructions or not. But on the sixth day, when they apportion what they have brought in, it shall prove to be double the amount they gather each day." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "By evening you shall know it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall behold the presence of the Lord, because he has heard your grumblings against the Lord. For who are we that you should grumble against us? Since it is the Lord," Moses continued, "who will give you flesh to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to the full, because the Lord has heard the grumblings you utter against him. What is our part? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord."
All right. So we can, it keeps on going. But we can take a pause now just for a second. And what do we got? What are some of the things that we notice here? What do we like to comment on? Anybody? So we could do a little comparisons about how the Israelites keep fantasizing about how wonderful Egypt is. They mentioned it also that they would, why did you take us to the banks of the Red Sea? Is there a shortage of graves in Egypt so that you brought us out here to die? We could have died in Egypt, but when you have it over there, I'm looking over here. Here it is. This is back on 403 or 402 at the bottom. Okay, Alan, you got it? Chapter 14, start from verse 10, please.
As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them. Greatly frightened, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt, saying, let us be, and we will serve the Egyptians, for it is better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the wilderness? But Moses said to the people, have no fear, stand by and witness the deliverance for which the Lord...
Et cetera. Good. So that's our first complaint as free people, right? Before we sing, we complain. And this is out of great panic and fear. And we could have just continued to be slaves in Egypt. Why do we have to die here? So now let's go again. Now let's skip a little bit, go a few pages. And now, now let's look at page 413. 413, this is chapter 15. And let's look at the top of the page, the middle of verse 22. They went on
into the wilderness of Shur. They traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. They came to Marah, but they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet.
Right, or I think a more literal translation, he showed him a tree. And he threw the tree into the water. Okay, and now we're a couple of pages later, so we have them grumbling again. This is their third grumbling, right? Their third grumbling so far. And when we look at the reaction, whether it's the reaction of Moses or the reaction of God, what do we notice that is the reaction and what is not the reaction?
Helps to kvetch.
What?
It helps to kvetch. You get what you want.
Right. So, Geraldine, keep on calling and kvetching. If you want that vaccine, just keep on kvetching. Okay. So that's it. So it helps to kvetch. When they kvetch, they get something, right? Of course, that begs the question. If they hadn't kvetched about Egypt at the Red Sea, you think God wouldn't have split the Red Sea for them? Was it because of the kvetching that the sea got split? I don't know. But in each of these times they kvetch, they get answered. What I want to point out is they don't get punished. They don't get, later on, when we get into the book of Bamidbar, they kvetch and they complain and they get punished for it, right? They lose their opportunity to go into the land of Israel. They get plagued and they die by the thousands and all kinds of stuff. There are all kinds of bad consequences for their lack of faith in God and for their being so bitter. In these three cases, nowhere does God get angry at them yet, right? He hasn't gotten angry at them. She hasn't gotten angry at them either. And Moses doesn't get vindictive toward them, right? The first time he says, just calm down a little bit, quiet. God will fight for you, don't worry. That's his first one, right? His second reaction is zero. God simply, gives him the solution. In this one, Moses and Aaron do have a reaction but what's the reaction? What is Moses' response, Moses and Aaron maybe, to this grumbling the third time?
Od ma'at uskaluni.
We didn't get to that yet.
Not up to that yet.
No,
Nope.
Moses is letting them know that you're not grumbling against us. This is about God. And just reminding them that, it isn't just people, it isn't us mere mortals that are the ones for you to look to. God will provide for you. So reminding them that that's what they should be looking for. Oops, he's on the phone.
He's getting Garland's vaccine.
Okay, back to you. So sorry, I missed a little bit at the end because I didn't know what that.
I was just saying that, they of course have to learn to trust,
Right.
their life, even if their life was difficult, it was always the same. And they knew it was predictable. So now things are really unpredictable, first in fear for their lives. First, are we going to have water? First, are we going to have bread, food to eat? It seems to me by this third grumbling, what Moses is trying to do is to point out to them that they should start to trust God, that it isn't about, they don't have to trust him, right? But he's not helping them. God is helping them. And I think it seems like Moses is trying to reorient them to be thinking about God.
Right. So why does Moses, and Aaron is actually included in this, why does Moses feel that he has to bring that issue up? Let's look at and let's also understand that this Moses, if you want to call it a reprimand or a lesson or whatever it is that he's clarifying to the Israelites, you don't really have any tainas against me. You don't have any claims against me. It's not us. We're really nothing. It's all God, and God will take care of you. God will provide. But that actually comes after God speaks to them, to Moses, and says, I promise I'm going to give them food. So the first response is not Moses and Aaron telling the Israelites, just have some faith. The first response is God's immediate response. Hey, I'm there. I got it. I'm on the case, right? I'm gonna be giving them bread from heaven. It's gonna be okay. And then Moses and Aaron say what they say. Let's read one more time what what the Israelites themselves say. Verse 3, back on 4:14.
The Israelites said to them, if we had only died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and we ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us out of this wilderness to starve this whole congregation to death.
Okay, so there's a kind of a complicated back and forth here about what the Israelites are saying, right? On the one hand, they acknowledge God, and they say, if only we could have died at God's hand in Egypt. But you, they don't say God took us out of Egypt, but you took us out of Egypt. You too, Moses and Aaron, you're responsible. If you would have just let God do what God wanted to do, we would have lived out our lives in Egypt. We would have died at God's hand. There's this funny kind of way of speaking here, which on the one hand sort of pays a little bit of respect to God, and then accuses Moses and Aaron of thwarting, what could have happened. Now, which is a little, forgetful of what was going on, I think. Yes, Jen.
I'm wondering, like, I'm fascinated by the fact that Moses is aware of this. You're not really angry at me. And he doesn't sound to me like he's taking offense, but your real anger is directed against God. And I think that must be at least partly a warning. Because as we were reading this, I'm thinking there's a hearing an echo. And I remember, I think it's Samuel, who when the people want a king, and God has to say to Samuel, Moses is like, Samuel takes offense, I suppose, because God has to say to Samuel, no, they're not angry at you. This is all about me. So I find that like an interesting, different reactions between Moses and Shmuel later on.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Nice. So God promises, and then Moses and Aaron come to the children of Israel and they say, look at verse 6.
Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, by evening you shall know it was the Lord who brought you out from the land of Egypt.
So first of all, Moses is actually responding to verse 3, where it says that the Israelites said, you two, Hotzeitem Otanu, you two took us out of the land of Egypt. You usurped God's power. God, could have just left us alone in Egypt, and you took us out of the land of Egypt. And now Moses says, you will find out it's God who took you out of the land of Egypt. We are nothing. V'anachnu ma, right? And then go ahead in verse 7.
And in the morning you shall behold the presence of the Lord, because he has heard your grumblings against the Lord. For who are we that you should grumble against us?
Go ahead, one more time.
Since it is the Lord, Moses continued, who will give you the flesh to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to the full, because the Lord has heard the grumblings you utter against him. What is our part? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord.
Right. And the Lord is hearing, right? And God has heard your grumblings. God has heard your kvetching. God has heard your complaints. So he first says it's all on God. It's not on us. And we're just here to help out. We just work here, right? We are not the bosses. God is the boss. And guess what? God is going to take care of everything. How is God going to take care of everything? What's God's response consist of? Rain
down bread from the sky.
Okay. What does Moses say their response is going to be?
Bread and beef.
Bread and meat, right.
Meat in the evening.
If you look at the first response by God, there's no mention there of meat. There's only the mention of the heavenly bread, and the promise that on Friday they'll get a double portion. Right. The beginning of this idea of a Shabbat. But we don't have God promising yet that they're going to get meat, that in the evening they'll get meat, and in the morning they'll get man, they'll get bread from heaven. That's not in God's words. This is Moses' words. Do we make a big deal about that? I don't know.
Moses also doesn't correct them that they were going to be killed at the hands of Pharaoh, not at the hand of the Lord in Egypt. He doesn't correct that.
Well, that I guess, yeah, he doesn't go into every single point about that, but he simply says, God took you out of Egypt, right? God saved your lives. There's a kind of an implicit message there. But the point being, it's all on God, and we are what? We are nothing. V'anachnu ma, says it like twice. Let's continue now. 4:16 is the page, chapter 16, verse 9.
Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole Israelite community, advance toward the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud appeared the presence of the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses, I have heard the grumblings of the Israelites. Speak to them and say, by evening you shall have flesh, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. And you shall know that I, the Lord, am your God.
Right. So, I'm sure that the biblical critics, pick this section apart, because it's a little bit, these two little paragraphs, 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12, would have fit a lot better earlier, right? They would have fit a lot better before Moses saying what he says to the Israelites. Because here we finally get the promise. Okay, I'm going to give you the meat, and I'm going to give you the bread, and you will know that I really am God. And we also have this element of the story that it's not just about you're going to see these miracles, and that's going to tell you that God is God. What happens in verse 10?
And Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community. And they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud appeared the presence of the Lord.
Right. We have what's called a theophany, a moment of revelation. And it doesn't say, what that consists of. So what does it mean that they saw God's presence, or they saw God's glory, the kavod? What does it mean? And yet somehow or other, they turn around, and there it is. I don't know if people saw or remember seeing, there was a movie, A Serious Man, I think it was called. It was a movie about the Jewish community with kids going to Hebrew school. A pretty depressing movie in many ways. But at the end of the story, right at the end of the movie, there's this looming storm that's approaching the community. You get this like foreboding sense of, the sky is like just moving closer and closer and closer. So I don't know what to make of this this description, but somehow they palpably get an experience. They see on their own that God is there. That God is there. Now, this is something that we scratch our heads for the whole rest of the Torah. How can they keep on denying what they went through? How can they keep on forgetting what it was? How can they keep forgetting their misery in Egypt? How can they keep on forgetting what God did for them? But that's what they do. And here we have at the Red Sea, they see God for a moment. There's a moment of revelation. Here again, there's this moment of seeing God, and then it goes away. And then it dissipates. And we have to just then go into the consequences. What are the results? What are the things that God is promising? What are the things that Moses and Aaron are trying to get the children of Israel to do? By the way, in 9 and 10, we have another peculiarity, right? Moses speaks to Aaron, and then Aaron speaks to the children of Israel, rather than Moses and Aaron speaking or Moses speaking. Jen, yeah.
I think I was just going to piggyback on something Sarita mentioned before, that I don't know. I don't know if I'm stealing your words or different words, Sarita. But the whole idea, though, that of course these people might forget. I think we can be more sympathetic with them now, knowing like how some of us firsthand, because we've seen it in in the teaching communities we work in. Like if you're raised a particular way, your world can become very, very small. And just bringing somebody out of Egypt and saying you're free is not enough to really be free. It's not enough to claim your autonomy. It's not enough to be able to widen your vision. I mean, there's got to be there's a lot of factors when you're raised in slavery, I'm sure, that really prevent your ability to move forward from it. And, I'm sure some people do it better than others, but I feel like we can be a lot more sympathetic now and not be like, well, how could they not know? How could they? I hope so anyway.
Well, so the way that you described freedom, I mean, I think is very much in terms of our concept of freedom, which means we've got empowerment, we've got our own autonomy, like I think you used the word autonomy. I don't know how much that's really what is expected here of the Israelites. Let's go back to verse 4, page 414.
And the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each that day's portion.
Okay, now there's a little, what's it called? Ampersand or whatever it's called, that little dash.
Yeah.
And what's it about? Why am I going to do this?
Called an M dash.
An M dash. Yeah, you've told me that before, and you'll keep on telling me because I keep forgetting, just like Egypt for me. I just keep forgetting. Yeah,
that I may thus test them to see whether they will follow my instructions or not.
So,
But before they can follow God's instructions, though, they still have to have an idea that, Pharaoh doesn't have control over us anymore. I walked out of Egypt, and, that's...
like what God might be saying is, so good, so don't be so autonomous. As God will say other places, be my slave. And you've been wonderful slaves to Pharaoh. So you know what? Just be my slaves. Follow my orders.
That doesn't seem to end up being what he says, so, and it has to be if you want these people to march in and take over another country, I feel like you don't have the right crowd yet.
So
But also
that
freedom,
seems to be a little bit of what he says here, right?
but freedom is freedom, if we think what is freedom? Is freedom being able to do anything that each person wants? Or does there have to be regulations? Does there have to be codes of conduct? Because it isn't just a single person; it's a bunch of people living together, and of course they're in relationships with each other, with God, and so there have to be instructions. So
Sure,
I think
but
coming to grips with
But I think that they don't even have the capacity to form those bonds properly necessarily, because these things were given presumably in Egypt. They did still have their family bonds, and they were still recognizably a people, but there was so much that was just a given. And to get out of that mentality and even to properly form bonds with Hashem, to form bonds that are different now, that are still with each other but are at a different level, at a different way, it's a very different world. They weren't apparently trained to be soldiers. They're not trained to fend for themselves in a desert, which I would have been the first one kvetching for sure. But it's a different. Even if I'm going to still use the word autonomy because I don't have a better one. But you need a given amount of it to even do the things to grow as a whole people, and even to accept what Hashem is offering, whether it's the rules, whether it's a brand new land of milk and honey, or whatever.
Let's not get into that. Let's stay right where we are here, and let's take what you're saying and see if we can think about what we're going to read now in terms of what you've just framed. Let's see, and maybe if we don't take autonomy, what about agency? Maybe,
agency is good.
Let's see what happens in this next section, which I would say, as God says, this is a test, this is an experiment. God says that at the beginning. I want to see if they can do this. So let's see what it is that they have to do. Verse 13.
In the evening, quail appeared and covered the camp. In the morning, there was a fall of dew about the camp. When the fall of dew lifted, there over the surface of the wilderness lay a fine and flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is this?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "That is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you requires to eat, an omer, to each person for as much of you there are. Each of you shall fetch for those in his tent. The Israelites did so, some measuring much, some little. But when they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no deficiency. They had gathered as much as they needed to eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till morning. But they paid no attention to Moses. Some of them left it until morning, and it became infested with maggots and stank. And Moses was angry with them.
Okay, let's stop for a half a second. So what happens is that we get the slav, we get the quail in the evening, and that's it. We're finished with describing that part of it. And now we have this lengthy description of the manna. So the slav is apparently some kind of one-off, and it's given no comment whatsoever. It turns out that quail go through these migrational flights, and they fly very low to the ground, and you can catch them very easily. So they get it like the first vaccination shot is they get a little quail that night. But the long-term help is going to be the manna. And the manna is different. The manna is not a natural phenomenon at all. The manna is bread from heaven. So what we have is a little bit of nature, a little bit of heaven, right? A little bit of just prosaic stuff and a little bit of miracle. Except the miracle is what now continues and the prosaic stuff stops. So the miracles happen every day, as we will continue to see. But it's magical, right? The quail is the quail, and people like to eat that meat, and they're happy. But the manna is a phenomenon of wonder, right? It's got this glistening, it appears out of nowhere. What is this? And it's this delicate kind of thing. It's the opposite. It's very ethereal. It's very it's as close to immaterial as you can get, and yet, of course, it's heavenly bread. It's going to be sustenance. It's going to fill up everybody's belly. Then we get this idea. Okay, go out, take what you want, but only take what you need. Right? And people start taking, and we get this vague kind of description. Some people took more, some people took less, but it turns out that whatever they took was exactly what they needed. It's not clear, is this their own agency? They actually abide by the rules and they really do follow the rules. I've got 32 children, therefore I need a little bit more. The other one is just a single person, I have to take less. Do they purposely on their own choose to take more or less? Or some take more, some take less, some get more rolls of toilet paper, some get less. But in the end, it actually turns out that that's exactly what they need. Okay, so then Moses says, and don't leave any of it over. In other words, whatever you're going to take to eat, great. But the next day, you're going to have to go out again. So no hoarding, no saving of this stuff. And then what does it say? But they paid no attention. Some of them left it until morning, and right? It became disgusting. So we get this, betrayal or failure. So we've got a mixed picture. They seem to be doing okay. They seem to be abiding by the rules. And yet at the other hand, some of them at least are not. And Moses gets angry. Finally, Moses gets angry. This is the first time Moses gets angry. Okay, and now 21.
So they gathered it every morning, each as much as he needed to eat, for when the sun grew hot, it would melt. On the sixth day, they gathered double the amount of food, 2 omers for each. And when all the chieftains of the community came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath of the Lord. Bake what you need, but bake what you would bake, and boil what you would boil, and all that is left put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not turn foul, and there were no maggots in it. Then Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is the Sabbath of the Lord. You will not find it today on the plain, 6 days you shall gather it. On the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none. Yet some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found nothing. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you men refuse to obey my commandments and my teachings? Mark that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, he gives you 2 days of food on the sixth day. Let everyone remain where he is. Let no one leave this place on the seventh day. So the people remained inactive on the seventh day.
Okay, so let's stop there. And now that's why I was saying, I think that this is very much to Jen's points before. This is a story of a society. Some people are doing one thing, some people are doing another. Some people are following certain rules, some people just can't get it. They don't quite want to follow. And then you've got a couple of anger episodes. Moses is angry, and then afterwards, God seems to be angry, right? Verse 28. How long is it before they're going to, that they're going to keep on refusing to listen to me? As soon as we hear that, since we are veteran readers of the Torah, but if we weren't veteran readers of the Torah, we might have a little inkling, but later on, when God gets angry, something happens usually, right? Usually when God gets angry at somebody, they get a slap in the face. Here, what happens? Nothing. Nothing. God just repeats himself. God said, let me read my lips. I really don't want you to do this. I want you to keep Shabbat. I want you to not go out there. It's not going to be there. Believe me, it's not out there. So just relax. That's what Shabbat is for. So stop, fighting it. Yeah, Marty.
Rabbi, I'm a little bit confused about something, or maybe I'm a lot confused about something. If we go back to 10, earlier, Alan talked about, I believe it was Alan, and the people saw God, saw the Lord. Now, did they actually see God, or did they see some manifestation of something that God did? Remember, Moses went up to Sinai, and it was a whole different thing. He saw the back of God.
Right. Here it says they see Kvod Hashem. They see God's glory or presence. They see.
But that doesn't mean, right, but every time you look at a tree, that's God's glory or presence too.
I'm glad you see that. Not most people don't. Most people see a tree.
Well, most people are more parochial than I.
No, seriously, that's the whole point. This is a moment, like I said, of revelation. This was a moment of undeniable sensing of God's presence. Most of the time, we see a beautiful sunset and we just say, wow, what a beautiful sunset. We see a beautiful whatever, and it's gorgeous, it's wonderful. We don't say, I see God. That's not the way most of us operate. Here, the Torah is saying, at this particular moment, they experienced God's presence as such. Right? Not that they saw, the perfect picture of God. There is no picture, to your question, but they felt God's palpable being. Right? That goes back there. Now we're into the rigmarole of living. God says, don't do it. And some of the people say, I'll do it anyway.
But is it that, or is it just, again, that this is such a disruption? This is so not the way that they used to live. And so in your previous life, I'm sure as slaves, they didn't, eat lavishly. And you probably did feel sometimes like, oh, I'm just going to put something away because tomorrow, I don't know, I might not have any, right. And also every single day I would have to try and find something. So that's what they're trying to do here. So, of course, some of them are going to see what really happens. And in fact, it's a really helpful thing because as they see that on a regular day, if they don't eat it, it goes bad. But on Shabbat, it doesn't go bad. And as they see that on every other day, it's there, but on Shabbat, it isn't there. That's how they learn.
That's a great explanation for why there are no punishments here.
Yeah.
God can be annoyed. God can say, I just made it very clear, didn't I? How long will you not get it? And nevertheless, God just keeps it going. Every day, we're going to do this again. Every week, we're going to try it again. And hopefully you get the hang of it. right? But that's what part of what this story is. Again, as I say, juxtaposed to all the stories we will have later, where finally God has had it. And God says, enough is enough. By now, you're supposed to actually be able to do this.
But Moses did get mad, right?
Moses got mad also,
yeah.
but Moses doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Moses doesn't say, okay, therefore I'm going to throw a couple of people in jail. Later on, we'll have Joshua saying to Moses, oh, look, there's these people, they're out of control. Put them in jail. Right? We have other people, when they do bad things in the book of Numbers, they get put in jail. Right? So they get, put under arrest. So no, Moses is annoyed because Moses feels that they should get it by now. And meanwhile, Jen is saying to Moses, you know what? You have to be firm, but be patient, right? And to a certain extent, that's the message of this story.
A lot of it is just teaching parenting techniques.
Yeah.
The Israelites who are leaving are a brand new nation, and they're like newborns. They get up at night, they get up, they cry, and everyone is very attentive. And then at some point you start to mold behavior. And by the time they're adolescents, you get really pissed off at them.
All right. But we haven't gotten that far yet.
All right.
They're not adolescents yet. Okay. Any other comments for this?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Sure.
I'm struck by the similarity of the cycle of the man, that you get double on the 6th day, and then the 7th day you get none, and with a similar cycle of letting the 7th year let the land lie fallow with Shemitah, that it's not just a matter of resting, but also that in anticipation of the Shabbat, the 7th year, the 7th day, that in anticipation on the 6th day you get double.
Right.
You get that much more.
Right. And that's what God promises, of course, as you say later on, when we have the Shabbat for the land, God says, don't worry. And it's not going to be, I'll give you extra beforehand. You'll be able to have it. And that's then the point. The point is that then you can enjoy on Shabbat the sustenance that you desire without having to work for it. Right? Why do we have microwave ovens? And why do we have frozen packaged food these days? Because when you come home from work, how much time do you have before you're hungry? You want to be able to just eat it. Wouldn't it be great if the food was just like on the table? Wouldn't it be great if we were all men? And these miraculous women would just like serve all of us, and put the food on the table for all of us, so we don't have to worry about it. That's But can you imagine if you have to, after work, you have to also do more work to chop up the food and cook it? So that's the idea. The idea is on Shabbat, no, you won't have to do that. It'll all be ready because it's all from before, right? So there's not only the fact that you're resting, but you're also like getting stuff for free, right? It's all like the manna. So in a certain sense, the manna, of course, was every day was Shabbat. The bread was coming straight from heaven. All right. Sei gesund. Everybody take care. Hopefully we'll see each other next.
Shabbat shalom.